Well, what? I don't know.
I think we're live.
Here we go.
Oh.
How are you, my friend?
Good.
Just another disclaimer here before we begin. It is 50 years ago next month that Sheldon and I met. And we both look as good today as we did then.
We haven't changed a bit. We both still like red wine.
Exactly. As is my wont, I met Sheldon in a bar. But it was good because I was in charge of the bars at the Manoir Richelieu, and Sheldon was in charge of monitoring and controlling the bars, as it were, from the accounting point of view. So we did very, very well together that year. Sheldon's life has revolved around hospitality and food service. He's a graduate of Ryerson University, Bachelor of Commerce, Hospitality and Tourism Management, way back in 1974. He was at the Manoir for a short period, and then after that, he took a job with the Canadian Pacific Hotels, which was the predecessor to, of course, to today's Fairmont Hotels. And he spent much of the 70s jumping from property to property across Canada. I can remember him being at the Chateau Champlain. I can remember him being at the Chateau Frontenac, and always, as I said, near a bar and near good food. After that, he moved into the chain restaurant business out west. He was with a chain called Earl's at the time. He was also with the Keg, which is still around today, even though he worked there. He more recently, as I say, he was at the Manoir Richelieu. He was the regional manager out west for Controlled Foods International, which were the people that owned Earl's and that kind of thing. Then he went to Ottawa, and he became the director of development and planning for Central Park Lodges, which I can't remember. I think they had just had the two residents in Ottawa, if I'm not mistaken, Sheldon, at that time.
Well, they just had two in Ottawa. They had 65 company-wide.
Exactly, yeah. And that was from 85 to 94. Subsequently, he became the director of acquisition and development for lifestyle retirement communities, and that was from 1994 to 2002. He became vice president of the management services for Chartwell Retirement Residences in 2002 and was there until 2005. And just recently has retired from being the chief operating officer for Del Manor Seniors Communities. He spent 16 years with Del Manor. I can't remember, Sheldon, they're up to what, 18 or 19?
No, not that many. Not that many. We're just half a dozen properties, but we have 3 more big ones in the pipeline.
Okay.
So.
And Sheldon has been involved in the planning, the design, the construction phases, the hiring, and of course, the operation of these places. I don't know if you're still a member of the board of the Ontario Tourism Education Corporation, Sheldon.
No, I resigned from that a couple of years ago.
Okay. Pure retirement.
Not quite.
Yeah. Sheldon is one of those people that has been very important for retirement communities because the retirement sector is growing by leaps and bounds over the last 15, 20 years. And the generation driving that surge is increasingly paying attention to what they want to do, what they want to eat, where they want to live. Now, Sheldon has spent a lot of time in, certainly the last 15 years, in what I would call higher end properties. But if there's anybody that knows how to take the hospitality attitude and bring it to a senior's residence, this is probably the best man in Canada to do that. And with that, Sheldon, I'll pass it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm winging it a bit today. I usually find that part of the most value comes out of as people, later on will ask questions or sort of take us in a direction that where their interests lie, and I'm good with discussing anything in that regard. So, just to I guess my role goes back to the goes back to my early days in hospitality. As Jim said, I'm a Ryerson University grad, and you know, going to the Manoir Richelieu was that was after my second year of university, and then that was a tremendous experience. Aside from just meeting Jim, you know, that was my first taste of first class hotels, and it was something that started me in that industry, and recognizing the areas that became important to me. You know, the formality, the structure, the dealing with guests. So when I graduated and went with what's now Fairmont, as indicated, where I was at Chateau Lake Louise, and then the Chateau Champlain, Chateau Frontenac, and back again at the Manoir Richelieu under a management contract with Fairmont. And I ended up learning a lot about management contracts, which I did a lot of in later years in the retirement sector. But through that whole those hotel years, one of the things that really that I enjoyed was the logistics of in a large hotel. You've got a massive kitchen, and out of that kitchen, you're doing a lot of different things at a lot of different levels. So, you know, that kitchen may be producing, producing gourmet meals for the main gourmet dining room. But at the same time, there's things being prepared for the coffee shop. There's banquet stuff being prepared. And when that food goes out and goes into those particular dining spaces, there's expectations that follow. And those are things that what you would assume is going to happen in one restaurant, you would be thrilled if it happened in another one, because it's a different price point, it's a different clientele. It may be the same people, but they're at different points in their life. So I always found that part of it interesting, maintaining the overall quality by adjusting to what was being required. And I won't sort of drag on that element too far, but it's something that when I moved into the restaurant sector, and I went to Calgary, I was running initially 6 restaurants in Calgary, and then added a couple more in Regina and Saskatoon. Again, I had 3 different concepts. So it's the idea of dealing with people in different levels, different price points, and different requirements. And people are in those areas for their own particular reasons. So those are, that was something that was back in the 80s. It was a very difficult labor market. It was the oil boom. You could not get staff. I had about 600 staff working for me there. And when you're in that kind of labor market, you learn to adapt to what's going on and what's needed. And I learned a lot of lessons about team building. And in fact, I was telling somebody just last week, we were talking about that, and I was using an example that if you have a restaurant and a server is supposed to be in at 7 o'clock in the morning to serve breakfast, and they're partying the night before, which in a city where everybody was in their 20s did happen occasionally, and rolled in at 11, what do you do as a manager? Everybody says, well, you just boot them out the door. And no, you thank them for coming, because you know it's going to take you a month and a half to replace the person. But you have to build an environment where they're going to want to come to work, because they're letting down their friends, they're letting down their customers. They've got a reason to set their alarm. They know that that's really part of who they are, is their job. And it's not just about a paycheck. And that was something that, as I say, was really front and center for me in those days. After Calgary, I ended up, as Jim said, with the Keg. I was running restaurants in southwestern Ontario. I had 7 restaurants in 4 different cities, again, 3 different concepts. And so keeping that environment for all of the teams and for the customers was crucial. So moving into retirement sector, this was something that back in at that time period, Central Park Lodges was the largest retirement home company in Canada. It wasn't a huge industry, but the company had about 65 properties. They had 25 in Canada and 40 in the US. They were a Canadian company owned by Trisac out of Calgary. And so it was a time that retirement homes and the two in Ottawa that I went to manage, the focus was on healthcare. The Central Park Lodges originally had been nursing homes when they first started in Winnipeg. And so that was kind of the leaning. And the senior vice president of operations recognized that they were going to have to learn to compete in an environment in a competitive market like the retirement industry, and that hospitality needed to be more of a part of it. So they didn't really have a platform for that. So I was hired. I'd never worked in a retirement home, never managed a retirement home, and I found myself living in Ottawa and managing two retirement homes, and the person that was supposed to orient me couldn't quite make it. So I ended up said, well, that's okay. We'll just figure it out as we go. But there was two properties. One was about 150 units, and the other was about 120 units. They're next door to each other, both fully unionized. And the previous manager had been coasting to retirement. So basically what the union wanted, they got. So it was a little bit of a learning curve for me. But what really was front and center for me was the whole people part of it. Respecting the residents that were coming in, when respecting the process. When I would come in, whenever I take over an operation, I would come in, I ask a lot of questions because you assume people are doing it right. You assume they know what they're doing. And when you ask, how do you market it? Well, they look at me like I'm got two heads. Well, when you have an empty room, you call the person at the top of your waiting list. So, that was the kind of the approach to marketing. Food service, people are wearing scrubs like they would in a nursing home or a hospital. And so those things that I thought would be a quick fix turned into a multi-year challenge to get the mindset, to try to turn around a mindset in a property that was well established, that was unionized, and one of the buildings was 20 years old. And so that was kind of I guess some early learning days for me is getting that. When I put flowers on the table, I had a line up of residents come at my office to complain. Is our rent's going to go up because I put flowers on the dining room tables? I heard the one of the people before saying about the ice cream being put in hot bowls, and I can certainly see that happening. It's like putting hot soup in a cold bowl. Those things sometimes happen. And it's so important that as a company and as an individual operators, that they look at it from the residents' perspective, that it comes back to people, building that team. And as I say, in an older property where you have established habits, it takes a lot of intentional work. Now with I moved from there into being director of development planning for Canada, and a few months later they let the guy in the US go, so I had the US as well. And so a big part of my job in that role was to see what was happening across Canada and also in the US, and what the competition was doing, where the industry was going. And our company was sold, and I ended up going with Lifestyle Retirement Communities as Director of Acquisition and Development, and again, doing that sort of thing in Canada and looking at different markets. So but whenever I would look at a community, I would, I always assess how those people are being treated. I love going in and touring other people's retirement homes. Sometimes if I was driving through a city, I would just drop in. In fact, I did that. I did that last week in Victoria. Here, I saw one under construction, and dropped into the marketing office and had a chat with the owner. As it turned out, one of the investors is a guy that I used to work for in Toronto. So it was a small world. But it's important that to say, when I would see what other communities were doing, and sometimes they don't like to show competitors around. So that was, you can understand that. But yeah, I'd sit in the lobby for 20 minutes and read their brochure. And by the time they figured out that they were going to tell me to hit the road, I'd already heard the concierge answer a bunch of inquiry calls. I'd seen how they treat their residents. I'd seen how the staff are dressed. And so I really didn't need to see a whole lot more to know what kind of an operation they were. But it's about the people. With Del Manor, I was very fortunate. It's the seniors housing division of Tridel. And I came into Del Manor sort of through Chartwell. I was VP for Management Services in Canada, and Tridel was one of our clients. They had decided to build a retirement home, and they had Chartwell managing it. So I was the person overseeing it. And then they decided to build their own team and asked me to join them. And it was a family operation. They're the largest high-rise condominium builder in Canada. And this was all rental, but their reputation as a builder was that they built top quality products, and that they're well known in the community. So it was a good fit for me in terms of it was a new company, and we built all the rest of our buildings. So I was involved right from out looking for land, stomping around through the bush to see if I thought this would be a good place for it, working with the architects to design the buildings, and then putting together the management team. And in fact, my last building that I worked on for several years just opened a couple of weeks ago in Aurora, north of Toronto, and it's 242 suites, and it's a spectacular building. It's they've sent me the pictures, so I'll be there, and I'll be back in Ontario in I guess in 3 weeks. So I'm going to be going up there for lunch. But we've got an amazing kitchen in there. Obviously, food service is near and dear to my heart. So we've got a really good operation there. But when you're building the teams, again, you're able to get that through your staff, and there needs to be ownership. And that's something I saw in the hotel business. Somebody was a dishwasher in Chateau Champlain or Chateau Frontenac. They probably could make more money working at a little bistro down the street, but they were a dishwasher at the Chateau Frontenac. That was a sense of pride, a place that they belonged, that they could feel proud about, and that was something that I always instilled in the restaurant business, and then moved into the retirement sector. And so when I would go into one of our communities, I always stopped and listened to how things were going for all of the team members. I'd go into the kitchen, I'd talk to the chefs, and recognizing that these are people that are standing on their feet on a hard floor in a hot kitchen for 8 hours a day. And those are jobs to be respected. Everybody has their role. And that's what I've used to tell my team. It's a big jigsaw puzzle, and every one of us has a piece to put in. But whether it's my piece or whether it's the dishwasher's piece, the picture isn't whole and operating without that person. And so you get people that are working 20 years as a dishwasher. That's something, again, that's a position to be respected. And growing up on a farm in Eastern Ontario, I saw Roger was from Arnprior. Well, Roger, I grew up on a farm near Renfrew, so I know that I know that area, but it's how you deal with those people and recognize the needs of our residents and focus on them. So often in the early days of the industry, as I'd find that when somebody would come in for a tour to get information, it would be the nurse that would go out and meet them. And 10 minutes into the conversation, the nurse would be asking questions about their bowels and their continence. And, to me, that's not something I'd ever run into in the hotel business. And, that wasn't who we are. They weren't coming to see us for that reason. People were coming because they had a need, and the need may be that the house down the street was broken into and they don't feel secure, maybe that their spouse passed away. So those discovery questions, it's so important to get to know the person and get to know what their needs are, because in our business, it's a very long sales cycle. Sometimes the sales cycle could be 2 years. There might be 11 contacts between the time the person walks in the door. And as I tell I tell my management team, it's not an impulse buy. It's not like buying a new sofa. That it's just because of our ad in the paper. We would put in, I tell my people, you could, $1,000 doesn't really buy you anything really in advertising, but $1,000 will buy you a hell of a lot of tea and cookies. The key is you've got to go serve that tea, and you've got to serve the cookies, and you spend time in the senior center. You spend time in the church groups. Participate in stuff in the community, because it's your community that decides how successful you're going to be, because they're the ones that are spreading your gospel. And if they know that this is a place where people care, that becomes contagious. It's one of my properties, one of my Del Manor properties, I had a good young general manager who would come up. He started with us as doing valet parking, and he worked his way up to general manager. And we had another community, a larger community, that the general manager had family issues and had to take a few months off. And so I put him in charge of the other property as well. And he'd come back to his own property one day a week, and he said, it's really not, I come back and it's like there's no big stack of stuff on my desk. There's no people lined up at the door. It just ran while I wasn't here. And that's something I emphasize, that to me, it's how it runs when you're not there is what tells me what kind of a job you're doing as a manager, because that the culture and the brand needs to be right through the entire community. And we did a lot at Del Manor with, focusing on our terms of reference. We're not other retirement home companies. Our terms of reference were Four Seasons Hotels, Ritz-Carlton. We send some of our training people to Washington to take the Ritz-Carlton training. All of our management team read the book that Izzy Sharp wrote on founding Four Seasons, the books on Ritz-Carlton, and books on Good to Great, things that other companies that have really achieved great things in building their customer base. Those were all part of who our managers were. We were a small company, and as we grew, we said, okay, we need to establish our vision, our mission statement. So we took about 30 of our staff, housekeepers, front desk people, cooks, people that had really positive attitudes. And we took them to Niagara-on-the-Lake for 3 days at a resort. And we had a facilitator, and we worked through who our company was, what our mission statement was, what our vision was. And, those are things that were they came back, and those are things that were entrenched into all of the team. And I know I'm being repetitious, but that is the key. Every day at 11 o'clock, we'd have what we call our stand-up, and any staff that can get away comes down to the dining room. They stand in a big circle and update each other on what's going on in the building, because people want to be informed. They want to know before Mrs. Smith walks in the door and they say, "Oh, hi, how was your day today?" They want to know that if her daughter passed away the night before, or that she just got back from hospital. They want to know that in advance, so that the responses are appropriate. If there's somebody coming in for a tour, the marketing people, then we, they know what they can help support that person. So it's, as I say, it's about building the communication that everybody feels part of the team, and it works well. You're welcome to go on to our Del Manor website to see some of our communities, and we've attracted a very good quality. I always say good people attract good people. So recruiting hasn't been an issue, because if people know that it's a good place to work, and we're constantly doing surveys. In fact, we just went from doing an annual survey, which we did for about 10 years. We just moved to one which is done every couple of weeks. And you might say, well, that would drive me crazy, having my company ask me what I think every couple of weeks. But what it was almost like those survey monkeys, and it's a company out of Alberta that has that does it, and but it's short and sweet, and we have everybody's email address. So there's a quick, maybe 3 questions. How are you feeling about this? We've changed this. So it isn't, if you don't like it, okay, well, in 6 months when we send out the survey, tell us about it, because 6 months it's old news. So this is how this is good. It's something I like, something I don't like, and it's all anonymous, and where it gives us the ability to respond fairly quickly. We put in our all-star system, where we've got stars for if somebody goes out of their way to help you as an employee. You could reward them. You could give them some of your stars. So you're constantly getting points, and you could give some to your friend who helped you, who stayed late to help you reset a dining room, or help you clean rooms, whatever. So all of those things that give people control over what their daily work routine is. If somebody was out shopping on a day off and they saw a book on golf, and they knew they had a resident who just maybe had a family member pass away, but who loved golf, and they said, "Hey, George would like that," and they bought the book and brought it in, we'll give them their money back. And that's a personal thing then they're giving to that resident, to make them know that somebody cares, somebody's thinking about them. And so, like I say, we've kind of built that into Del Manor with the help of all our team, and and we've stayed basically I've told our management team we try to operate as if we are unionized from a lot of perspective. We've stayed non-union, and the feedback we get is that people feel they're being listened to, and they can be talking. If they have an issue, they can go to their supervisor. If the supervisor doesn't solve it, they have the right and the expectation to go higher. And maybe once or twice a year, I would get a call at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night from somebody who had an issue and didn't feel it was being resolved. And I was happy to talk to them. So again, those are the types of things that I think are important in a retirement community or any place else in the hospitality. One of the things I used to like to do is, our general managers periodically would have town hall meetings. So all the staff are in, and basically they give them an update, but usually it's an update on changes in payroll or changes in benefits or, some of the logistics. And I would always try to attend when I could. But quite often what I would do is when the meeting was wrapping up, I'd kick all the management out. And so I would be there with the staff and, and they're in a lot of cases sitting there looking like deer in the headlights. But, you sit there and you wait for somebody to say something and, and you just say, hey, how's it going? Hey, you've had your new general manager for a year and a half now. How's it working? Is that person supporting you? Are you able to, do you have everything you need to do your jobs? Because you know what you're doing. Is there anything else we can do to help you? And usually there's somebody that likes to kind of, take center stage. So that, somebody will say, well, my vacuum cleaner hasn't worked in 2 months and, and they won't fix it. Fine, you need a new vacuum cleaner, That's, but the conversations that I'd have in there, I wouldn't say who said what, but it might give me an idea that we need more training in a certain area, or that we need to check our supplies, that I understand that maybe there's some issues with vacuum cleaners. So let's get the guy in and let the staff test out some new models, and people are proud of where they work. And I even had one situation where there was a supervisor that was stealing. And, somebody mentioned his name and, 3 or 4 other people kind of rolled their eyes. I said, okay, well, what's happening here? And by the time we finished, everybody throwing in a little bit because they didn't want to say too much. It gave me a pretty good idea that something was going on. A week later, we had some hidden cameras in, and 2 weeks after that, the person wasn't with us anymore. But the staff felt that nobody had gone back to talk to them. Nobody had done anything, but we were listening. We cared, and they weren't allowed to take things. So why should the supervisor? And everybody was being treated fairly. So, but as I say, the hospitality. It's all about people. It's all about caring. That the management team is honest, respects our residents. When people come in for a tour, they're not talking direct. They're not talking just to the kids, which happens sometimes. Yes, the kids are 60 years old and senior, and the top of their careers and expect to be addressed. But it's that person that's, 91 and a half that Kathy made reference to, that they're the ones that are changing their life. They're the ones that are maybe moving from their home they've lived in for 50 years. And they're the ones that needs to be respected. And, as another thing I've always told my team, and people will not remember everything you told them. They'll not remember everything you did, but they'll definitely remember 100% of how you made them feel. And how you made them feel is really what the business is about, and both for the team and for the residents. So anyway, I know I've been rambling. I've covered quite a few thousand kilometers, and once I get started, sometimes people have to bring their lunch or a toothbrush, and I can keep them going for a long time. So I'm not even sure how our timing is.
Our timing is good, Sheldon. Just going to ask if anybody has any questions for Sheldon.
I'm going to start with one very quickly. It's nice to come from a place of what I would call riches. You've worked for some marvelous places, and I know that you've built some gorgeous buildings, and there's people that pay $10,000 a month to stay in these residences. What are the differences, and what things can be the same between a high-end residence and a less expensive residence?
As I indicated, it's about the people. It doesn't cost the company any more money for the team there to treat people with respect. and to listen to them. And to put those tools in place where, you know, it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to somebody who's stressed, who's overworked, maybe has been doing the same job for a long time, maybe has a lot of personal issues, but it's something that can be achieved by the company and the organization having a very clear vision of what's being expected of that person. You know, you're doing in your food service things, departments, you may have a different budget. You know, you may not have rack of lamb and prime rib on your menu. But you can, when you're doing menu planning, you can have some feedback. One of the things that I used to hate when I'd be in some companies, and even when I was working for Chartwell, I'd be in some buildings, and I'd hear residents complain about what was on the menu that day. You know, and a response that I'd hear, well, the menus are done in Toronto and at head office, and we don't have any control over it. You know, thank you very much. See ya. Thanks for the question. You know, but it's, you know, that's not what we did when at Del Manor, when we did our menu planning. I had the culinary managers, I had the general managers, I had half the corporate team, and we talk about what the feedback was from the residents. So the people in the property, they couldn't say they didn't have any input. They couldn't say that it was being sent from someplace a few thousand kilometers away. You know, they were part of it, part of the process. So they were able to more honestly answer the questions. And it's difficult to do food service in a retirement community. Is, you know, it's not an easy thing. I learned that fairly quickly coming from the restaurant sector. You know, you can't do a lot of spicy foods. You can't do a lot of fried foods. You can't do a lot of ethnic foods. You know, but it has to be, but you want people going away talking about how great your food was and how great, and when anybody that eats in the same dining room every meal all the time, it's bound to get a little boring just from the routine. So it's trying to mix it up and trying to make an interesting menu. But, you know, if you don't have a big food menu, it's items that you can do, like you can do a pot roast instead of a prime rib. You know, you can do a leg of lamb that comes up once every 2 months rather than once every few weeks. There's things that you can do to balance off your costs. So it makes it, it's about making it work, Jim, on the from the numbers, but it's about the bottom line is about the people, that they care.
Thanks.
That's a long-winded answer to a short question. Sorry.
There is a question in the chat, Sheldon, from Dawn. Do you have any comments on Quebec's planning for the older population?
No, I'm not close enough to it, and we didn't have any properties in Quebec. So in terms of, but Quebec has always been an interesting piece of the retirement home sector. The capture rates, I looked just before I came on and sort of looked at my notes from a few years ago. The capture rates, which is the number of people living into retirement versus the overall seniors population. The capture rates in Quebec was 17.7% back a few years ago. In the rest of Canada, it was about 7%. In Ontario, it's 5.4%. So it's about 3 times what it is in Ontario, say, and which is really good for the industry, because Quebec's always had a strong retirement industry, and it has what's referred to in the rest of the country as being the Quebec model, where the units were very independent units. They may not have any food service involved. And, and this is all kind of things that we've agonized over for years, saying, well, if we get a 17% capture rate in Quebec, why can't we, if we could get 17% in the rest of the country, we would be, we would have a great success story on our hands. And, but it doesn't tend to work that way. But we kind of looked at the housing models in Quebec. And I think traditionally, and you know if I'm, I may be way off base, but what the statistics that I had was that there was a higher percentage of rental accommodations. So people were at that one set of figures, it was about 39% were rental, whereas in Ontario it was about 29%. And that was consistent with the rest of the country. So if you've got people, if you have seniors that are living in a rental unit, that they've been living in an apartment, fourplex, whatever type of rental units, then moving into a retirement community is not a big step. It's if you've always lived in a detached home that you owned and you have equity in that home, then that's one of the biggest challenges, is to get people to give up the equity in their home, move into more of a congregate apartment setting, where they're paying out, as Jim said, maybe $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month, even though they can well afford it, because the housing market has taken their $15,000 house and turned it into $1.5 million. So it's something that, certainly the retirement industry in Quebec is huge. And I think that they've been doing some good things, but, they've been, big retirement homes that were built seem to work there, whereas in a lot of other parts of the country, people weren't as comfortable with having large properties. But the way construction costs are today, everywhere's building bigger ones. We have a couple of Del Manors that were 112 units. Everything that's on the books now is over 300 units for new properties. Just because with construction costs, you cannot afford to build those little places anymore. And but you have to make those 300 units feel like home. Somehow you have to translate that size into a whole bunch of little modules. You got apartments, you have designated assisted, you have the supportive assisted living, you have assisted living, you might have memory care. And we have all of those things. We had all of those things within Del Manor. So we're building Alzheimer's units in one building, and we're building apartments on other ones. So that was something that you try to still make it feel like a small community, but but the supply of retirement communities traditionally was a lot higher in Quebec than it was in the rest of the country. And I think part of that was that people were there was a market of seniors who were comfortable, living in that environment. As I say, the sales cycle sometimes can be 2 years, because people are trying to get their head around giving up their home and moving into more of an apartment setting. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's it's certainly Quebec has always been very good at that, and they're I think it's more on the care side that maybe there's some extra things that are now coming to light, because if you put 300 independent people with no services into a big building, guess what? 10 years later, they're all 10 years older and need more services. So, sometimes it's meshing that to make it work.